Honorable Minister of State, ICT, Mr. Junaid Ahmed Polok, Honorable MP and Chair of Parliamentary Standing Committee, Mr. Sabir Hussain Chaudhary, Honorable MP and President of KBAA, Mr. Munjur Hussain MP, His Excellency Mr. Lee Jang-kyun, the Ambassador, Republic of Korea, Ms. Young Ah-do, Country Director, KOICA Bangladesh Office, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good evening to you all. Let me start my presentation with congratulating KOICA in Korean language. KOICA Changlib Samsib Chunyanyol Juga Habnida. I'd like to pay deepest homage to the greatest Bengali of all time, our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. I would also like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to the war heroes at the very outset. I would also like to thank the organizers for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share our thoughts at a time when Bangladesh is passing through an important transition, graduation from group of LDCs. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today's keynote is about our status and our aspiration on graduation. I will try to show you our journey towards achieving our goals and try to focus on the way forward. During the next minutes, I will be showing the slides while describing from which our struggle to achievement glimpses. Ladies and gentlemen, despite the major setback during the early years, Bangladesh gradually moved towards fulfilling her development aspiration. The pace of development gained notable momentum since 2009 when the able leadership of Sheikh Hasina. The transformation that Bangladesh has gone through since then has been phenomenal, marked with distinct structural transformation from dependency on the low-income agro-based sector to the high-income manufacturing sector. Over the last one decade, the country has gone through tremendous changes, thanks to our prudent policies of the government under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina that have paved way for the development impetus to work through multiple channels. Between the years 2009 and 2020, per capita income rose from less than $800 to $2,064. CPI inflation rate stabilized below 6%. Total investment as percentage of GDP rose from 26.2 to 31.7. Poverty rate sharply fell from 40% to 20.5%. Confidence continued to grow as the international reserve surged from $7.5 billion in 2009 to $43.8 billion in February 2021. Wage earners remittance inflow doubled from $9.7 billion in 2009 to $18.2 billion in 2020. Government's prudent fiscal and monetary policies helped for this way of advancement. The external debt stock as percentage of GDP even fall from 26% in 2006 to 13% in 2020. As a result, Bangladesh has never faced any debt distress. To sustain the development initiatives, the government has always pursued policies to help promote export-oriented initiatives. The government has supported RMG. As a result, export of RMG is now in a world-leading position. Exports of other potential items such as ceramics, pharmaceuticals, ICT services, etc. are also increasing. To draw investment from abroad, 100 economic zones are being developed and various incentives are being offered to investors. As a recognition of the consistent performance of both the economic and social sectors, recently the United Nations Committee for Development Policy recommended Bangladesh's graduation from the LDC group as the country has fulfilled all the criteria for the graduation. In fact, Bangladesh fulfilled all the three criteria, namely GNI per capita, Human Asset Index threshold, and Economic Vulnerability Index threshold by 2018 and sustained it. According to the planned timeline, Bangladesh will formally get out of the LDC group by 2026. Ladies and gentlemen, this is indeed a great moment for the country and will recall with deep gratitude the joint efforts that our development partners forged with us over the years. Like most other developing countries, Bangladesh has considerable resource constraint and maintain deficit budget every year, with mostly financing made available to Bangladesh Our development partners assured that Bangladesh can carry forward its development initiatives consistently. With increased flow of remittance, exports, and reserve, Bangladesh welcomed the increased share of net foreign financing in the total financing requirement of the national budget. As the external position of the government becomes stronger, the government has been gradually increasing the share of foreign financing in the total financing requirement stipulated in the national budget. In 2014, the net foreign borrowing was only 8.07% of the total budget financing requirement. By 2020, the amount rose to 40.87%, more than 5 times than it was 6 years ago. This reflects by the fact that foreign aid flow increased from 3.8 billion in 2014 to 7.4 billion in 2019. We thank the government of Korea and its development windows, such as KOICA, as well as all our development partners, for widening the scope of cooperation, as well as deepening our relations over the years. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the graduation from LDC Group indeed establishes the fact that the performance of Bangladesh has been consistently up to the mark. However, we are also aware of the challenges that are associated with it. Certain benefits designed for the LDCs, such as preferential market access, will erode. Concessional financing sources will become narrow, and availability of global assistance, such as UNFCCC, will also shrink. If we sum up, with the improved capacity, Bangladesh might need to carry forward the development initiatives with costlier external financing options. To prepare for the scenario where the traditional sources of external financing are not able to supply required funds even at costlier prices, the government may also need to parallelly explore the option to raise funds from domestic sources as well as from international capital markets. For this, the tax GDP ratio will need to be increased significantly by broadening tax bases and enhancing administrative efficiency in tax. The domestic financial sector will need to be further deepened, and at the same time, capacity to borrow from international markets will need to be developed. With a view to realizing this goal, various measures such as deepening financial inclusion, developing local equity and bond markets, innovative financing mechanism to enable private sector to join major development initiatives of the public sector, etc., will need to be explored in greater extent. At the same time, continuous prudent and flexible policies to infuse efficiency and resources for development through financial intermediaries would be of good importance. The fourth industrial revolution has opened up immense opportunities for our young population to exploit the benefit of global connectivity. But at the same time, we also have to steer through a transition where conventional physical labor as input of production may face the risk of being replaced by capital-intensive ventures. Climate change is already posing visible threats to human life and living standards, and we have to find out solutions very quickly. While facing these risks, we also have to keep in mind that fulfilling the goals of SDG will require an enormous amount of financing in various sectors within the next 10 years. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on top of all this, significant uncertainty about the economy and the society was mounted when COVID-19 started to spread its menace last year. Although at first we thought that we would experience growth to shrink severely, as well as other vital pillars of the economy, including flow of remittance, export, and other external resources damaged, Bangladesh has already emerged as one of the countries that has been able to manage the shocks of the outbreak impressively. Timely stimulus by the government proved to be effective in countering the looming risks. Both remittances and development assistance continued to increase that helped insulate the economy by building a solid foreign exchange reserve as well as keeping the development projects running. As a result, while many economies around the world, including the developed ones, are expected to shrink drastically, the growth rate of Bangladesh is expected to be more than 5% this year. Graduation would be supported by exploiting alternative avenues of financing, to continue facilitating mobilizing resources both from traditional ODS as well as from new and innovative sources to close the graduation gaps by engaging and partnering with TFIs, the private sector and other stakeholders. As focused, we need continuous support from our partners. Development cooperation can contribute significantly to enhancing cooperation in areas such as trade, investment, transfer of technology, especially for poverty alleviation, gender, agriculture and rural development, food security, infrastructure projects, ICT, environment, disaster relief and reconstruction, debt relief, banking, training of civil servants, governance, capacity development, and advisory services, and also humanitarian aid. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we leap into the next phase of development, while managing shocks like the ongoing pandemic, we'll have to be more selective and careful about our future ventures to make sure that we do not fall into the middle income trap. We are sure that our development partners are aware of this, and this will always be in mind while we plan our future development initiatives. Let me reiterate that a prerequisite for sustaining development during the post-graduation phase is structural reforms, and we'll need special attention in the areas improving business climate, transforming human capital into pool fit for 21st century, efficient design of ADP, innovative financing, public-private partnership, export diversification and market integration, strengthening research and development capacity, increased capacity of financing from domestic and international commercial sources. These are only a few measures among many others that will need to be addressed during the coming years. While we plan for the future collaborations with our development partners, these factors will surely shape the formulation and execution of those collaborations. Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's development roadmaps, Vision 2021 and Vision 2041, have outlined an inclusive and participatory development model at the center of all national development efforts. We are committed to realize the vision of the father of the nation, to build a country free of hunger, poverty, and exploitation. With support from the people as well as our trusted development partners, we will surely realize that dream. Before I conclude, let me congratulate KOICA once again for the remarkable achievements over the 30 years. It is my firm belief that the next 30 years of KOICA in Bangladesh will exceed our previous history of mutual development assistance by exponential factors. Thank you all for your patience and thank you very much.
First of all, I congratulate KOICA for 30 years of operation and also 25 years in Bangladesh. KOICA and Bangladesh, in fact, Korea and Bangladesh will create bilateral cooperation. And through this cooperation, we have a very deepened relationship between our two countries. We have just heard a presentation from Shahriar Siddique, Joint Secretary of Economic Relations Division. So we have get some idea about LDC and the impact of LDC on ODA. My presentation actually focus on which countries are LDC, actually, what you know about LDC, criteria, how Bangladesh is performing to graduate from LDC countries to become the middle income countries, and then how much we have achieved actually in terms of indexes, graduate from LDC to developing countries. These are actually the major three topics. And finally, I will tell about the recommendation of the UN CDP, which actually declared that Bangladesh will be graduated from LDC. So at the outset, the least development countries are actually the countries which has very low income and suffering from long-term impediments to growth. These countries have low level of human resource development and vulnerable to both socio-economic and environmental scale shocks. According to UN, least development countries is the list of developing countries with the lowest indicators of socio-economic development and the lowest human development index rating of all countries in the world. So the concept of LDC is actually emerged during the first decade of development in the UN. The LDC category was officially established in 1971 by the UN General Assembly. And when it was started, the list includes only 25 countries. At some point, it reached to 52 countries, but at this moment, there are 47 countries which are listed in the LDC category. Bangladesh included in the LDC list in 1975. And the reason for categorizing this LDC is that to support the LDCs to graduate from a very low level of income and vulnerability to a developing stage. So developing countries and developed countries, they are supposed to provide some support to these LDCs so that they can sustain with their economic activities and human resource development. So usually the support comes in terms of international support measures. There are three major categories. These are trade-related support measures, development cooperation measures, and support of UN nations and other international forums. Trade-related support measures includes preferential market access for trade in goods and services, special and differential treatment and flexibilities under WTO agreements, and trade-related capacity building programs and initiatives. While development cooperation, the LDCs get support from the bilateral and multilateral partners through grants and concessional credits, and also from international financial institutions like World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and others. This LDC receives support by the UN system organizations and also gets support from EIF, LDC Fund, UN Capital Development Fund, Technology Bank. The support of United Nations and other international forums, these also comes with caps of interest rate and discount on the contribution to the UN system budget and support to travel to the officials and citizens for special purpose. So as we have already heard that LDCs are least developed countries with low level of income, low level of human resources and vulnerabilities. So there are some criteria fixed by CDP, and these are based on the per capita GNI, gross national income, human asset index, and economic and environmental vulnerability index. In the next slide, I will elaborate what this index includes. So the graduation eligibility actually, an LDC country has to reach to a certain level of GNI, and then it has to overcome the human asset index criteria and also overcome the threshold level of economic and environmental vulnerability. And a country has to reach at least two of these three conditions to graduate from LDCs to developing countries. There is another condition actually, alternately, which is based on per capita GNI. And if an LDC country, it has got twice as much threshold value of GNI, it can apply for graduating from LDCs. So basically three criteria. One is GNI per capita, one is human asset index, and the other one is economic and environmental vulnerability. So the threshold value for 2020 for GNI has been fixed by the UN GDP Committee for Development Policy was $1,222. 2018, it was $1,230. And increasing GNI actually give hints for better living standards and provide an impression that the country has enough resources to make development efforts by its own without depending on others. The Human Asset Index, it consists of actually another two index. One is Health Index and the other one is Education Index. The Health Index again consists of four criteria: the under 5 mortality rate, the maternal mortality rate, and prevalence of stunting. And the Education Index, this also has got three criteria: gross school enrollment rate ratio, then adult literacy ratio, and gender parity index for girls. So all these six criteria has got equal weightage when it's calculated. health index and education index. Next index is economic and environmental vulnerability index. It has two other indexes. One is economic vulnerability index and the other one is environmental vulnerability index. And in this section, the economic vulnerability index consists of four criteria. One is share of agriculture, forestry and fishing to the economy. Then remoteness and landlockedness situation of a country. Then merchandise export concentration and instability of exports of goods and services. The other index, environmental and vulnerability index, has got four criteria. These are share of population in low elevated coastal zone, share of population living in dry lands, instability of agricultural product, and the other one is, so there are four of them, and altogether actually for economic vulnerability index and environmental vulnerability index, there are 8 criteria and all are equally weighted. Let us now see actually how Bangladesh economy performed during several decades towards graduating from LDC. Bangladesh government had actually a firm commitment to graduate Bangladesh from least development country to a developing country. Our Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, she participated in 4th UN conference on LDC in Istanbul. In that conference, actually, the participating countries, they committed that the list of LDCs should be halved. And our government's commitment was firm to achieve this graduation of LDC, while we were also very much committed to perform in MDGs and now in SDGs. Let us now see actually from the very beginning, from the inception of the country, how we performed in the growth scenario. We can see from this table that the first 5-year plan, which was formulated in 1973, and the period was from 1973 to 78. This was formulated during the era of our founding father of the nation, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And the average growth target was 5.5. And at that time, when the country was very much destitute, still the growth rate was 4%. And the achievement was about 72.73%. And since then on, actually for all the 5-year plans, we can see the second one, the growth target was 5.6 and actual growth rate was 3.5. The second 5-year plan, which was targeted to reach 5.4 and the actual growth rate was 3.8. And similarly, all the 5-year plans, they had positive growth, but the recent growth surpasses all the previous 5-year plans growth. We see the 6th 5-year plan, it targeted to achieve 7.3 average growth rate, but it achieved 6.3. And the 7th 5-year plan, which targeted about 8 point something, and we reached 7.13% average growth rate. So this is more than 7. For the last decade, our GDP growth rate is more than 7. Let us now see how Bangladesh performed in the front of poverty reduction. And we can see that during 2000, the poverty was 48.9, and which came down to 24.3 in 2016. And in 2019, it actually reached to 20.5. And about the absolute poverty, which was 34.3 in 2000, it came down to 12.9 in 2016. It actually further came down to 10.5 in 2019. So you see that we had the commitment in MDGs as well to halve the poverty by 2015. And Bangladesh actually achieved that MDG goal in 2015. So in the front of poverty reduction, Bangladesh has a remarkable achievement. And the government has a commitment that by 2030, we want to reach a point that the absolute poverty will be 0. And by 2041, we want to reach in a position that the moderate poverty level will be less than 3%. So the poverty reduction target is quite remarkable and helped us to sustain from the vulnerabilities. We can see from the graph the average growth rate of the average economic growth, GDP growth rate of the country. And we see 2001, average growth rate was 5%, which reached to 8.13% in 18 and 19. The GNI per capita in 2001 it was just below 500, around $480 US. It reached to $1,909 in 2018-19, and recently it reached to 2,064 US dollar. So we have a positive upward growth trajectory as well as per capita income. The reserve of the country, which was around 2 billion US dollar in 2000-2001, it's reached to around 33 billion US dollar. But in 1819, but in 2021, the reserve of the country even went up, and it is now about 44 billion US dollar. So the country has a comfortable foreign currency reserve, and the trend of remittance inflow is upward. We see in 2001, it was around 2 billion US dollar, and in 2018 and 19, it became 16 billion US dollar. So you can easily see the foreign income of the country from the remittance. The FDI flow, you can see in 2001, it was just below 500, and it gradually increased, and in 2018, it is even more than 3,500. From the presentation of Mr. Shahriar Kader Siddique, we heard that the government is establishing hundreds of economic zones, and these economic zones are giving facilities to the foreign investor to come in and invest in Bangladesh. And this has created an opportunity that the FDI flow should go even further. Rice production, which is very important for food security in our country, and Bangladesh has become self-sufficient in rice production. From 25 million metric ton in 2021, it's reached to about 35 billion US dollar, million metric ton. So this is a remarkable achievement for our country to feed the people from our own production, reduce the dependency, food import dependency from outside, and it reduces the huge risk. In the social front, you see the under 5 mortality rate. In around 82, our under 5 mortality rate was around 210, and in 2015 it came down to about 45. And maternal mortality rate also from 569 in 1990, it came down to 176 in 2016. Currently, it is around 173. So you see, the Bangladesh was actually greatly hailed, greatly appreciated by the international community that Bangladesh could achieve the under 5 mortality rate and maternity mortality rate, which were also included in the MDG targets. And the prevalence of undernourished children, 3 years average age, which was about 20%, now came down to about 15%. And gross enrollment ratio in secondary school, in 2016, it grew up to 70%. So we can see that the economic front and in social front, Bangladesh is doing much better. And in all the fronts, we have some positive achievement. And these achievements are sustainable achievement and strong, steady achievement. So considering the fact that Bangladesh is from a vulnerable situation, gradually overcoming all the hurdles. So it is towards the graduation from the LDC to developing countries. Let us now see actually how much we have achieved towards graduating to the developing country status. What the indexes say about our. So Bangladesh, let us now see the present status of graduation. Let me tell you one thing, that Bangladesh was first evaluated in 2018 for graduation into the developing countries. And at that time, as we discussed, that there were 3 criteria. Bangladesh achieved or crossed all the indexes for graduating to the developing countries at that time. And 2021 was the second triennial review. Bangladesh participated in that review, and we now see the result of that review. So per capita, as I told that in 2019 we reached 1909, but then human asset index, as we discussed earlier, that it had 6 components, and this under 5 mortality rate, the CDP independently they collected the information from UN source and national sources, not always from the BBS, Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics. So what they found is under 5 mortality rate, their value was 30.8. Maternal mortality ratio was 173. Prevalence of stunting is 30.8. Gross secondary school enrollment ratio was 72.6. Adult literacy rate was 74.7. And gender parity index, gross secondary school enrollment was 1.2. With all these positive results, and the threshold was 66 and above. So Bangladesh's point was 75.4, which was comfortably above the threshold level, while our BBS estimated 76.7. The Economic and Environmental Vulnerability Index consisted 8 components. The economic vulnerability indexes was consisted of share of agriculture, forestry and fisheries, remoteness and landlockedness, merchandise export concentration, and stability of exports of goods and services. So in each of the cases, we see the share of agriculture, forestry and fisheries, the point was 13.5. Remoteness and landlockedness 37.8, merchandise export concentration was 0.04. Instability of exports of goods and services was 2. And the environmental vulnerability index, we see share of production population living in low elevated coastal areas was 8.4. Share of population living in dry lands were 0, and instability of agricultural production was 3.1. And they calculated the points for this economic and environmental vulnerability. For Bangladesh, it was 27. It has to be below 32. So Bangladesh was quite comfortably achieved that threshold. To sum up, actually, we had 2 evaluations, one in 2018 and one in 2021. And in case of GNI per capita, the threshold value was 1230. In 2018, Bangladesh's per capita income was 1274 according to CDP estimate. And in 2021, it was 1827. In both the cases, we crossed the threshold value of 1230. Then human asset index, the 6 indexes, the 6 components, and the CDP calculated that our achievement is 73.2 in 2018 and 75.4 in 2020. In both the evaluation, we were comfortably above the threshold value. An economic vulnerability index, which has to be less than 32. For the case of Bangladesh, it was 25.2 in 2018, according to CDP estimate. And in 2018, for 2020, it was 27. And in this case as well, both the points we reached, we achieved below 32. So Bangladesh is unique in the sense that Bangladesh achieved all 3 criteria in 2 evaluations. The countries which already graduated from LDC to developing countries, actually they achieved 2 out of 3 indexes. So in this case, Bangladesh is unique. Considering these facts, on 26 February 2021, the UN Committee for Development Policy of ECOSOC, Economic and Social Council, has recommended for Bangladesh to be graduated from LDC in 2026. Usually CDP or ECOSOC provides 3 years, but considering the fact of Corona spread and Bangladesh's request, they provided Bangladesh 5 years time. So in 2026, Bangladesh will be graduated from LDC to developing countries, and during this period, Bangladesh will enjoy all the facilities, all the supports it used to get as an LDC country. So in this golden jubilee year for Bangladesh, this is also a remarkable achievement for Bangladesh. We also thank our development partner, KOICA and others, because they were all through with us, supporting us, helping us to achieve all those remarkable achievements. And now we are even stronger than before. And we have a visionary plan. As I told you that we have our perspective plan we want to make. We want to achieve all the SDGs by 2030. And by 2030, we want to reach at a point where there will be no absolute poverty, but there will be some moderate poverty. And in 2031, in 2041, we want to reach at a developed country, a high income country, when our poverty, moderate poverty level will be less than 3%. And we also want to achieve a higher income country in 2031, upper middle income country by 2030. According to the World Bank criteria, we have achieved lower middle income country in 2015. So in 2030, we want to be the upper middle income country. And I think we are quite comfortable with it. I want to conclude my presentation, and I want to thank everybody for giving questions here in this conference room and also in the Zoom platform. Thank you.
Honorable Chairman Mr. Munjur Hussain MP, Mrs. Young, the Country Director of KOICA, Board Members of KBAA, Mr. Forhad Siddiky, Joint Secretary GED and General Secretary of KBAA, distinguished guests and audience, officials of KOICA, and distinguished participant of Zoom online platform. Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon, good evening. At the very outset, I would like to thank KOICA to invite me to present the impact of LDC graduation and on the eve of KOICA's 30th anniversary. Already my two previous senior colleagues has presented more on LDC graduations, especially the remarkable progress has had in the last decade by Bangladesh. Basically, I will focus mainly on the post-graduation impact on LDC. Though we are getting graduate from LDC by 2026, but still there are some challenges we have to cope up. In my presentation, at the very beginning, I will briefly discuss about the recent progress of Bangladesh economy. Then I will discuss some international support measures that Bangladesh presently enjoying. And basically, I will focus more on the challenges and impact of graduations. Finally, I will conclude my presentation with few recommendations to get out from the graduation impact. As my two previous colleagues has discussed about the remarkable progress during the last decade, I would like to focus some important points that we have already got the per capita $2,064 as well as we have the GDP growth of 8.15% at the 2018 and 19 fiscal year. Although we have a downslope in the last fiscal year due to COVID impact, we have achieved 5.24 GDP growth, but we have already fixed a target of 7.4% of GDP growth in the 8th five-year plan. So we hope that we will overcome this COVID impact and we will again get the momentum of the GDP growth. Another important thing is that we are moving from the agrarian economy to the manufacture-based economy, because we are mostly focused on service-based economy, that the share of service sector is about 51%. Then it followed by manufacturing sector, 38%. And finally, we have only 14% share of the agriculture in the GDP. Although we have the very few portion share of the GDP in agriculture sector, but we have a tremendous development in the agriculture sector due to the technology development that ensures our food security. On the other hand, we are also getting some high valued crops and very value added agriculture production in our agriculture sectors. If we look at the external sectors, we have already achieved some momentum in the import and export. As my previous colleague mentioned, that we have already gained the remittances of about 18 billion in the last fiscal year. If you look at the socioeconomic progress, we have already got some progresses in the socioeconomic, especially in the poverty reduction. The last 2019, we have already got the 20.5% poverty. But due to COVID, we have again some bottlenecks of poverty, because the BBS estimates that now the poverty rate would be around 29%. However, we are progressing with a lot of social safety net programs to reduce the newly established COVID-19 situations poverty status. But we hope that we will overcome this situation soon. If we see the growing advantage of investment segments, we see that we have a huge opportunities in the current situations because we have the export-oriented sectors, especially we have the large young populations. We have 32% of the young population, which is very high, and we have very low wage rate if you compare to the other Asian countries. And we have also established a lot of economic zones and others facilities. If we look at the consumer market, we have a huge demand, local demand, especially we have large number of populations. As we are gaining the per capita income, so people are now moving to the brand-oriented product or brand-conscious product. So we are moving towards very quality products. That's actually increases the quality product production. Actually, trade-related support measures come from the basically in the preferential market access. In the preferential market access, about 61% of our garments exports go to the European market. This duty-free, quota-free scheme we get through EBA, everything but arms scheme. But other than the UA, we have 38 countries. They also give us the same preferential market access. Of the total imports of the European Union, about 10% of the imports come from Bangladesh. And the main importers of our garments are the Germany, then followed by UK. So we are supposed to get it preferential market access, I mean the duty-free, quota-free to 2027. Now it will increase 2 years more because our graduation will be in 2026. That's why we will get this preferential market is up to 2029. Then what are the postgraduate challenges? As I mentioned earlier, that we are supposed to get some general supports from UN. But if we graduate from the LDC, we will not supposed to get some general supports like the UN contribution 0.101% and other travel grants and scholarships. And also we will not get the loss, we will not get the development assistance as we are presently getting on the concessional and low interest rate. We have to pay more interest rate and we will have no grace period in fact. And we are getting some, as LDC, we are getting some other facilities like the Least Developed Countries Fund and Global Climate Change Alliance. These two funds are basically given us to fight the climate change impacts. So if we graduate out from this LDC, then we are not supposed to get two funds. And another fund is the United Nations Capital Development Fund. This fund is given to the developing countries, LDC countries, to promote the small businesses or small enterprises in the LDC countries. And there is a projection that if we graduate out from the LDC, then now we are getting a lot of technical assistance and grants from the developed countries, that we will gradually get less grants or technical assistance from the OSCE countries or developed countries. That if we see that the fiscal year 2020 we are getting much, and gradually fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 2030-31, that it will be very contractionary. So our development assistance will obviously cut down. This is also the interest rate. If we graduate, then our interest rate from the 2026, now it will be 2029 to 2041, the average interest rate will be increased about 0.5%. That will actually impact on our economy. Then the loss of trade-related international support measure, basically three categories trade-related ISMs are given. First is the preferential access to markets, then World Trade Organization related obligations, and then some trade-related capacities. Then first of all, as a preferential market access, we will lose the duty-free, quota-free, which is mainly to the European Union and Canada, Japan, Australia. So if our export basket, about 85% of garments products, so if we lose the duty-free, quota-free to the European market as well as the Canada, Japan or Australia, then it will huge impact in our garments industry. In that case, we have to take appropriate measures to tackle this impact. Another important thing is the WT withdrawal of a specific special treatment, that is the intellectual property rights as well as trade-related property rights. Both will be withdrawn. In that case, will affect our drug industry, because we are now freely producing our drugs. In that time, especially after 2033, will not able to produce this drug because the Patent Act. So the obviously price will be heightened. This is the two scenarios of LDC specific schemes before and after. The present situation, LDC specific schemes we are getting from the European Union as well as the USA, China, Japan. Especially European Union, we are getting the everything but arms. But after graduation, after 3 years of the smooth graduations, that means 2029, we will have the standard GSP or GSP plus and other options for other countries. So we are now actually getting much more privileges than before. This is the post-graduation challenges. The tariff rates after graduations, the tariff rates will be much more higher, up to 9% for knitwear. That is the 53% of our exports, as well as woven garments, that is 38%. Both tariff rates will be higher, about 9 to 12% in different cases. It will be great impact to our economy. Apart from the trade related, we have also the other impact, like the tariff reduction on agriculture products import. Definitely there are some certain facilities Bangladesh will lose, and we are now getting more facilities to discuss or dispute resettlement, but in that case we will lose these opportunities. We will also forego some benefits according to the LDC's future trade negotiations. And as LDC, we are now priority to access facilities. In that case, we may not have these priorities. The first trade-related intellectual property rights, as previously I mentioned, that whenever we will be graduated after 2029, or for especially the drugs, it will be extended for next 3 years. That means 2033 or 2034. Then we will not given the opportunity to now produce the drugs as the basic drugs or patented drugs, because there will be cutbacks, and in that case our the export earnings will be reduced, because now we are exporting more than 20 countries our drugs, and we will lose also the domestic employment and domestic drug related facilities. And only the very big companies or big drug manufacturers will exist due to some other embargo. So we have also make ourselves prepared for situations. And this is the one study report. According to Rajak and Rahman in 2019, they found that if we lose the export earnings, potential loss of export earnings after graduation in Canada and Australia market due to the tariff rise, that we see that we'll lose about in the European market $1,600 US, also Canada 175, and totally we will lose $1,806 US due to the tariff heightens. Other study found some impact also. We in the GED, General Economic Division of Bangladesh Planning Commission, we have also studied that what is the impact of graduations. In case we find that ranging from 1 to 4 billion US, which is the possible loss, and 2 to 11% of exports. The possible tariff rates will increase about 10%. And most likely scenario will be the export loss is about 1.8 billion US, around 5% of our exports. According to UNCDP, it is found that about 9.6% of our most products will be high, and also no quantity projections will be taken. And WTO also has a study that find that 8.9% of the tariff will be increased. And that was our impact. Now, what should we do, or what should our strategy, or what measures we need to take to cope up these situations? First of all, we have to strengthen the implementation of prudent macroeconomic framework. That means we have to keep the low inflation rate as well as the low interest rate. At the same time, we should have also the stable balance of payment. On the other hand, we should have also have the stable exchange rate. Definitely, we should create the congenial business environment through reducing the doing business cost. Because cost of doing business in Bangladesh is high. On the other hand, we have to mobilize the most domestic resource, especially tax GDP ratio is very lower in our country. And we have to export base or export diversifications, because without export diversification, we cannot compete with other competitor countries in garment sectors like Vietnam, India or Pakistan or Sri Lanka. And we have to go behind the border issues. So we have to more focus on our domestic investment, especially the quality domestic investment. We have to more focus on how to get more efficiency in our productions. And we also create some policies as well as some environment for the FDI attraction, because if we do not create some facilities like electricity or road transport facilities, we cannot attract more FDI. That's why we have to do something like we have to clear the report clearance easily and reduce the cost of doing business. And definitely our state ministers said that we have to go for the fourth industrial revolutions. We have to take up the technology, because without technology we cannot go further. That's why we have to go for automations, and in every sectors we have to take the technology for productions. We have to more focus on skill development as well as quality education, and we cannot go further. And as we are passing forward or moving forward, we have to revise our trade policy. It should be modernized and up to date, as well as our industry policy. Without this, we cannot cope up the LDC impact. And finally, we have to have the trade policy capacity. We have the coordination between and among the ministry divisions. We have to more focus on capacity building, not only the institutional but also the individual level. If we do all these things, I hope that we will smoothly transition to our LDC graduations. In that case, we hope that we will also tackle the impacts of obstacles coming during our graduation period. With this, I would like to finish my presentation, and thanks once again to our KOICA colleagues. I would like to once again request you to for your development cooperation or assistance in our Bangladesh development. Thank you very much.